That's great. Thank you so much, Janet.
We're all naggers. The best people are naggers.
Well, and Janet for Marvia and Susan Stocking, because Susan's an officer on the district advisory committee.
Right.
We reached out to MSBA, Marvia, to ask for what kinds of supports they might provide us for legislative advocacy training or strengthening of our cadre of parent advocates for legislative work. This kind of was a conversation that came out of the Government Relations Committee. So just because they're a great resource.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you, Patty. Just so you know, we are live now.
All right, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
And you still have a couple of minutes, I think, before we would start.
Are you the MC or is Kathleen the MC?
Marvia is the MC this morning.
Marvia.
That's why she's so bright-eyed here.
I haven't seen her yet. I need to, oh, there she is.
What'd you ask, Jen? Sorry, I went to get some water.
Nothing, I was asking who was the MC, but it's
not me, not me.
In June is the taped session from Tuesday night. Is that already posted by any chance?
Hasn't been posted yet. We are trying to find it to get it to Megan.
Okay, great. So if we could make sure that we get that posted, that would be great.
Yes.
All right, so let's get started. I want to say good morning to everyone and welcome you to our school board school. Thank you for making the time on this beautiful Saturday morning to join us and learn more about how we can bring more folks into the fold of supporting our students by running for the school board. So I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Dr. Marvia Jones, and I represent Sub-District 4. And I want to just give you a quick opportunity to hear from Ms. Susan Stocking, who's going to tell you about the District Advisory Council that's coming up as well. And then right now, I'll just give you a quick overview of what's going to happen throughout the morning. So we'll have a discussion from Ms. Linda Quinley about the Kansas City public education landscape, where you'll learn more about just the financials of the district. Then we'll have Ms. Janet Tilley with the Missouri School Boards Association discuss the roles and responsibilities and how we do policy governance for KCPS. Then we'll have Ms. June Kolkmeyer talk about election rules and requirements. So how do you even get that campaign up and running and what kinds of documentation you will need? And then we'll have some Q&A. I want to remind people to input any questions you might have into the chat function. So if you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little chat bubble. If you'll click that and leave any questions that you have, we will be monitoring those, and that way we'll know which questions to respond to toward the end. So thank you, and right now I'll turn it over to Susan.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. Am I on mute?
Yep.
No, okay, good morning. I'd like to welcome you to School Board School this morning and introduce the organization that I'm representing. I am a part of the Kansas City Public Schools District Advisory Committee. And the District Advisory Committee, officially, this is our official role here. We address school issues and concerns and allow parents to network, share ideas, and solve problems cooperatively. And in addition, we serve as an advisory role to the district's Board of Education. Some of the things that we do include general informational meetings. And those general information meetings that we have, that's our opportunity to collaborate. We often present topics in that meeting that the school board is seeking feedback from. Those general informational meetings are often attended by parents, school board members, KCPS administration, teachers, school principals, and members of the community. So it's different than the school board in that we talk to one another and we are collecting feedback. We do collaborate directly with school board members and feedback, and some of the committees that we are involved in with the District Advisory Committee have included enrollment, IT. We have advised on equity policies, and we have advocated for things like increased social workers and counselors, tech equity, and one of the collaborations that we worked on with Dr. Jones recently, actually last year, was with Dr. Jones referred Alive and Well to us, which we have a partnership with them, bringing trauma-informed practices to our school district. So I wanted to just pitch the District Advisory Committee if you're interested in serving on the Board of Education. If you are interested in learning more about the district, and if you're interested in making those connections with the administration, with the board, with the community, the District Advisory Committee is an excellent place to start. In my time in District Advisory Committee, I have worked with KC TIF Watch, Urban League of Greater Kansas City, NAACP, More Squared, League of Women Voters, Kansas City Chamber of Commerce, Kansas City Voices for Integration. And, you know, we also work with our city legislators and our state legislators. And that includes some legislative training that we've had and parent advocacy days that we've had in Jefferson City. So we're reimagining all of that in the age of COVID. And so there's a lot of exciting opportunities. If you're interested in attending a DAC meeting or serving on the district advisory committee, I will put my email address in the chat of this meeting, and please feel free to reach out to me directly. We will be announcing our January District Advisory Committee General Meeting in the next week. And again, well, thank you very much. And thank you for your interest in serving the Kansas City Public School District. As a parent, I am a parent of a 7th grader at Paseo, and I just get very excited when people want to serve the district. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you so much, Susan. And I realized I had a huge oversight. I wanted to step back and just introduce all of my friends who are on the call today from representing the school board and the administration. And so I'll just start from what I can see here. So I want to say that I want to introduce our 2 at-large board members, Patty Manser, who is our board chairperson, doing a great job with that. Then we have Miss Jennifer Wolfsey, who leads up our legislative committee. So you've probably seen her, you probably saw her earlier this week or yesterday, I guess, for a legislative update. So, and then we have Miss Janet Tilley, as I said, with Missouri School Boards Association, who provides advice and training around how to be a good school board, really. We have Miss June Kolkmeyer, who handles all of our, just keeps us all in order and handles administrative duties and just keeps us knowing what's going on. And then we have Kathleen Pointer, who handles a lot of our policy direction for this administration. And we have Miss Linda Quinley, the financial guru. So I just wanted to step back and introduce everyone. Thank you all for being here as well and using your Saturday.
All right. So I think, Linda, you and I are up next. Is that correct?
Are you ready for me to share screen or?
I am. Because
Okay.
you're my driver, right?
I'm your driver.
Love it. Okay, while Linda's getting up our deck, I'll just introduce myself real quickly. My name is Jennifer Wolfsey. I am a parent in the district of 15 years. I have a senior this year at Lincoln and an 8th grader at Border Star. Or no, they came from Border Star, but my 8th grader is at Paseo. And I was elected to the board in 2016, and I was reelected in 2019. So I'm serving my 2nd term. And just another plug for the District Advisory Committee, because that's kind of how I got my entree into school board service. It is an excellent way to just get involved at the district level, especially if maybe you're not contemplating this time a board run. It's a great way to get involved on a way up to a board run. So highly recommend that. And what's so nice, well, it's kind of nice in the time of COVID, you can actually, aren't those meetings, just give me a thumbs up, Susan, are they publicized? Okay, so you can participate from home, which is kind of nice as well. All right. So we have a lot to get through, Linda and I, so I'm going to start to go very quickly, but we're going to take you through an overview of the public education landscape in Kansas City. Let me switch my thing. Okay. So first off, note that there really was no comprehensive assessment of what we call the whole entire system, which would be Kansas City Public Schools plus the charter schools. We also began to notice there was little collaboration or coordination between these two, if you will, overarching systems. And we realized, I want to say the timing was in the 17-18 school year, maybe even as far back as 16, we were starting to see a system that was not really becoming sustainable, essentially. So we decided to take the lead in 2018 and conduct that system-wide assessment. We looked at things like academic achievement, who we were serving demographically, and a lot of this was actually prompted by a pretty concerning statistic around mobility. You know, we had certain schools that we were seeing almost 2/3 mobility within a year, and that would just be students moving into the school or out of the school in 1 year, which, as you could probably expect, has a lot of negative impact on classrooms and schools just in keeping things stable. As well as we were noticing, we studied the financial and operational implications or impacts of this overarching system that we had. And the goal in doing so was just essentially to create a more sustainable system that was stronger and able to offer more opportunities to our students. Next slide, please. So let's just start at the beginning. Let's look at enrollment over time in the district. So between 1990 and 2000, sorry, I'm trying to look at messages as they come into 1990 to 99, we had kind of a stable enrollment. The blue line is our enrollment. And so it was roughly around 35,000. In 1999 is when charter schools were established by law, and in 2000 when the first one opened. So we switched to the gray line still being the overall enrollment, but you'll start to see down there at the bottom, the gold line is the charter enrollment. And as time goes on between 1999 and 2009, the entire system lost approximately 10,000 students. We in KCPS declined significantly during that time, and you'll see the rise in charter enrollment during that time as well. We did have the annexation in 2009 where we annexed a number of the schools on the east side over to the city of Independence. So that's a fairly significant drop there from 2008 to 2009. But what has happened over the last, 10 plus years now from 2009 on, enrollment is actually stabilizing to growing as a total, but a lot of that is due to charter growth as you see that gold line start to increase. Kansas City Public Schools did see a decrease at the beginning of that last 10-year period, but kind of as of late until just recently during COVID, we were kind of stabilizing our enrollment. Next slide, please. So what we want to try to show here, we were trying to look for a comparison of number of students systems in the state of Missouri. And so we happened upon Springfield Public Schools. And what we want to show you is just kind of really what the impact of choice and charters has had on the number of options building wise and grade level wise. So in Springfield, you have 5 high schools as compared to our 15 high schools in Kansas City in the system overall. Again, remember this is Kansas City Public Schools plus charters. And then you'll have 9 over in Springfield, 21 in Kansas City, 36 elementaries in Springfield, and 44 in Kansas City plus the charter system. Springfield has 1 school district, the Springfield Public Schools, that run that entire system. In Kansas City, you have a little bit of a different setup because of the fact that we have charters, here in Kansas City and over in St. Louis. We have 4 charter sponsors in our area, which one of those is ourselves, Kansas City Public Schools, but we have 21 charter school operators. So that means, if you will, I call it a mini district administration that is running that set of schools within the charter system. And so I add us to the mix of that because we would also be another district operator. So we'd have 22 of those in our system in total. And just think that through for 1 second. That is 22 district administration operations. That's a lot of dollars that don't get to necessarily go straight into the classroom. Next slide, please. Okay, so you know, we do have a lot of choice, and that's great. And actually, I also like to point out that we had choice even before we had charters, because we had a magnet school system coming out of the desegregation case. So we're no stranger to choice in Kansas City. But one of the things that we have noticed in doing the overarching look at this was we have a retention issue within our system. And currently what happens is we have over 50% of our students leave the system between the journey from kindergarten to 12th grade. And that's a problem, not just for us, but that's a problem for the charters as well. Next slide, please. So one of the other things we discovered was, or just trying to understand, well, why do we have this exodus of 50% of our students on their journey through the K through 12 pattern? What we noticed was we started to look at grade configurations and maybe some what we call established feeder patterns. So this chart is Kansas City Public Schools, where we have a lot of options, but it can get confusing and challenging for parents. So for a lot of us, we may have grown up in, on the left-hand side in the darker blue, a traditional feeder pattern that goes elementary to middle to high school. Then the right-hand side in the lighter blue are some of those more popular magnet school themes that we now refer to as our signature schools, some of which actually do tend to go K through 12, but a lot don't. And so it then forces parents and their families and the students and their families to then kind of navigate this, this feeder pattern and grade configuration arrangement. Next slide, please. So this is actually the same thing, but in the charter world. And so similar, you'll see on the left-hand side, you've got a few charters that actually go K through 12. And I think there's even a few maybe right there to the right. I believe Academy Lafayette is now going K through 12. So this chart needs a little bit of an update, but you can still see over on the right-hand side where it's not a clear path, K through 12, again, presenting some challenges for our parents. Next slide, please. So let's take a look at what this may mean for just high schools in particular, going back to that example of Springfield, Missouri, where you have roughly similar size of students, 6,000 to 7,000 students. But, you know, remember, we have 15 buildings compared to their 5. So what happens is your average number of students per building is much lower in our system. And, you know, not getting too deep into the weeds, what happens in this situation is in the world of secondary education, to be able to offer all those bells and whistles when it comes to academics, so things like multiple languages that go for 4 years, or higher level science and higher level math and all those cool electives, as well as extracurricular activities and athletics, that you really need some efficiency and cost effectiveness to be able to do that. And you get it by having more students in your building. So this is a challenge for this overarching system of Kansas City Public Schools plus charters. Next slide, please. And one of the more disturbing things that we discovered was that we have actually, it seems as if choice has brought forth more segregation within our schools. And so we looked at this, and there are 2 parts to this. There are what we call, and this is down in the bottom, so if you want to go back and reference it, segregated schools are those that are more than 75% of students receive free and reduced lunch and are more than 75% Black and Hispanic. And intensely segregated, that number rises to 90% free and reduced and Black and Hispanic students. And so this is an area that we are deeply concerned about and would like to address. As you can see over there in 2017, the difference between, you know, Kansas City Public Schools and charters. I think next slide, please. So now I'd like to transfer over to Linda Quinley, and she'll go into some more detail on the financial implications of this.
Good morning. Thank you, Ms. Wolfsey. Some of the work as we started this study of our system, we wanted to understand the inefficiencies at a high level so that internally at KCPS, we can address those where we can, and then collaboratively with our charter partners, we can address them. So understanding funding for charter schools is an important piece of this study. So the largest factor is around local revenues. And the law says, the Missouri law says that charter schools share in current and delinquent local property taxes. That is not every line of local tax, but certainly the majority of local tax. Makes a couple of assumptions that are inaccurate compared to actual collections, because the calculation assumes that final assessed valuation as of July of each year is what actually gets assessed, meaning that no one appeals and no adjustments get made to those values, which we all know to be not the case. It also assumes that 100% of those taxes are paid, which again is incorrect. Normally that's going to be somewhere in the 93 to 95% range. This last year, because of the reassessment, it ended up in the 80 percentile, the upper 80s, I believe. And so it's an imperfect system for both us and the charter schools, but it's the one that the law lays out. So in 1920, charters received $4,646 per WADA, which is a common term that I should have spelled out for you. It's weighted average daily attendance. And what that is if your school has 100 students enrolled and they on average attend 90% of the time, you get paid for 90 students versus 100 students. So weighted average daily attendance is very important to all of us. In the system, as Ms. Wolfsey explained, us plus the charters, that WADA was 33,546 students. Now, what you see when you look back through the three previous years is pretty small adjustments year to year. And that is mostly because our assessed valuation has remained flat in Kansas City until this recent reassessment. Instead of having slow incremental increases, that's where you would normally see this number elevate. In fact, here it decreased between these 2 years, and that was because assessed valuation remained flat, but the total WADA went up. So this is a challenging area for both charters and us as we share the wealth, if you would. Last year, we reached a tipping point where the number of students in charters and the fact that the local revenue per child is greater than the state revenue per child by about $500. The state revenue for us was not adequate to pass the local revenue to the charters. And that's another rule written in the state language. We receive all of the local revenues from Jackson County, and the state makes a payment to every school and charter in the state every month for their state revenues. What the state does in order to pass local revenues to the charters on our behalf is they withhold our state revenue each month and pass those revenues to the charter schools. So what happens when we're getting more local revenue per student and our counts are growing to be very similar, our state revenue is not adequate to pass the local revenue to charter schools. So this board and this administration last year, as soon as we realized we'd reached that point, voluntarily entered into MOUs with the charter schools to make up that difference out of our resources. So of this $4,656 in 1920, 546 of it was voluntarily provided by the school district directly to the charter schools. Also, and I see I have a typo here, this should say 1819, not 1719. But of the 4656 that went to charter schools for local revenues, we only actually collected 4468. And there you see that difference between the assumption that 100% is collected and 100% of the assessed valuation remains in place. State funding is through a formula calculation. It does not move very much. As you can see, it's roughly $4,000 per year per WADA. And so charters are bringing in through their two primary lines of revenue, the state and local, right at $8,600 a year. The district, because of this pass-through, one of the things that's really important to understand about us as the school district, the traditional district, is that left $71 in 1819 per month for us to receive or per year for us to receive per pupil. So we are highly, highly reliant upon those January collections of tax revenue because we basically don't receive much revenue at all throughout the year. So I like to say we're like the farmer and we sell our crop in January and we have to make that work for us for 12 months. So you'll see as you study our financials that we have really high fund balance in cash at the end of June. And it's because we have to live until January when those revenue collections start coming back in. This is a little historical information about the change over time. In 2010-11, at the district, we received just over $20 million or 1.7 million average monthly from the state. And because of this change in the local revenue going up and the student count in charters going up, in 1920, we received zero directly from the state. I wanted to just throw this up because we're going to look at a slide of our cost to educate. In 1819, the board accepted the administration's request to really focus on some special additions that would enhance learning inside our KCPS system and focusing on interventionists, guidance, social workers, those kinds of positions, reading interventionists, math interventionists. That added about $5 million to the budget for 1819, and we've kept those in place. Expenditure per pupil is a common calculation and number that is required to be reported to DESE each year by every district in Missouri, just to give a little bit of comparison. We wanted to look at Kansas City Public Schools and the charters and what has occurred over time. In 2009-10, at KCPS, we spent just over $15,000 per pupil. The very next year, it went down to $14,000, decreasing by about $900. And I believe, I wasn't here then, but I believe that was a point in time when some schools were being closed and we were going through some internal cost efficiency reduction structures. In 1819, we spent $14,045. So over this time period, we are spending $24 more per pupil at KCPS than we did in 2009-2010. Charters, we're spending just under $11,000 at that point, but we've had a growth in the number of charters and the size of charters and the grade levels they cover, as Ms. Wolfsey showed you. And so that has gone up from $10,880 to $14,165, an increase of about $3,200, $3,300. Important to note, we do have a difference in demographics. KCPS tends to serve a higher number of special education students, high need students, high minute students, and a slightly higher Title I or free and reduced student. So where do charter schools make up that difference from that $14,000 spend to that $8,500 revenue? Largely in gifts. It's their second largest line of revenue, and this is an average number per charter school. Some have very little and some have a significant amount. Interesting to note that this is the average for the 21 charters, and it is more than Kansas City Public Schools had in gifts for the entire year for our whole system. Their third highest line of revenue is around child nutrition services because, like us, they are able to use our CEP status, which is Community Eligibility Program. And because of our high free and reduced populations, all children eat free, which will drive up that federal revenue here. So referring to some of the things that Ms. Wolfsey mentioned about the inefficiencies that are created simply by the number of buildings we have in place. So if you just think about high school, we have 3 times the number of high schools inside our system as Springfield did. So here's some of our study. When we look at the number of administrators, so this is going to be building administrators, again, more buildings. In Kansas City, there's 149 students for every 1 administrator. In Springfield, 253. And that's simply the fact that we have so many small schools inside Kansas City instead of having what would be a more typical and more efficient, larger school. We're spending $56 million on administration while Springfield's only spending 29. So a significant amount of money here that's going into leading the buildings instead of teaching and learning in the buildings. Our instructional expense, we do spend more, but not proportionately like we are in administration and some of these other areas we're going to look at. Where you see green, that means that the 18-19 data is actually improved from the 17-18 data. And so really happy that as a system, we were able to get a little more efficient around this. Buses and student transportation, it's one of the ones that all of us, when we talk with charter leaders and among ourselves, is the most frustrating to spend money on getting kids to school. 3 of our charters do not provide transportation, but the rest of them do. As we look at this, important to know that Springfield covers 300 square miles and Kansas City covers 67 square miles. Yet we are spending almost 4 times as much in transportation, $23 million more in transportation. And that is an immediate reflection of the cost of choice. We're not saying choice is bad, because as Ms. Wolfsey said, we have choice within our system. And so we have inefficiencies, because if you go to a charter school, or a signature school rather, we're going to pick you up wherever you live, and that could be driving you all the way across town. And that is, of course, how the charter schools work. So the cost of choice is what drives this up, in addition to the number of schools and school buildings. Number of buildings, of course, you have to assume is going to have an impact on the cost of just operating the plant. So this includes utilities, repair and maintenance, insurances, everything, custodial services, what it takes just to keep the buildings running. And you see we are spending twice the amount of money on this as Springfield is. Ms. Wolfsey, I think it's back to you.
Yep, great. If you could go to, okay. So let me get my deck here. I think it was 2017-18. We had just, it was, oh yeah, 17-18. I had to think about this for a second. We had a board, a superintendent that came to us, Dr. Bedell, and he said, we're getting approached pretty frequently about partnership opportunities. And so we were a board of 9 at that time. And as you can imagine, we had 9 different definitions of what partnership would be. And so what we asked Dr. Bedell was, could we have the time as a board to work through, what is it we're okay with? What would we be comfortable with? Because we didn't feel it was fair to him and the administration for them to bring things to us that we would not support. So we spent 9 months going through a pretty extensive program to come up with what you're seeing right now, which are what we call our board principles around education collaboration. And I'll run through them very quickly with you, and we'll talk about kind of how they're starting to show up now. So first off, we wanted to make sure that anything that came to us was going to enhance, based on what you just saw, we wanted to build a stronger system. So we wanted to make sure it was going to enhance equity and opportunity for students, that it would be more coordinated, that it would not compromise the financial sustainability of the overall system or add to the already inefficient and redundant components of it. It needed to meet some need that we have not been able to meet currently. And then hopefully the idea was that it would contribute to the academic performance of the system. And that we wanted to make sure that people coming to us were actually looking at KCPS as thought partners, not just somebody they could, use a building of or whatnot. Next slide, please. So I always say this, it goes without saying, but they had to demonstrate educational expertise and the ability to actually operate a school. And one of the things we've probably been talking about since this, but it's actually even in our legislative priorities, we wanted to make sure that they were going to be sharing data with us regularly, and that they would be subject to the same academic and financial accountability that we are as a public school district. We wanted to make sure we were going to see diversity not only in students, but also in staff, and that most importantly, that students, families, and the community were going to be involved in the development of the operation of the school. Next slide, please. The next part of this was the board's work. Then the administration went and took that information and created what they call a tiering system of opportunities to collaborate with us. So on the left-hand side, these are kind of really more your easier to do, lower hanging fruit opportunities where we would talk about sharing some best practices in various areas and maybe even do some of that overarching system-wide planning. And then in the center, Linda will talk to you a little bit more about this in the next slide, but that was the area that was of great interest, I think, which was maybe even contracting to us for some services or even purchasing with us to get some better economies of scale, if you will. And then over on the right in tier 3 was really that school model partnership, which I think was what really initiated the whole thing. But we really defined what those would be, either partnership schools, us sponsoring a charter, maybe us serving as their LEA, or even possibly co-location. So I'll turn this part over to Linda to walk you through just a few of the actual things that we're doing in these tiers.
Thank you. So we have been busy the last couple of years actually getting into some of these collaborations, and start with the low-hanging fruit and things that seem easier to accomplish, I think. In tier 1, there is an active special education collaborative, and our Director of Educational Systems, Dr. Sharnissa Holliday-Scott, holds monthly meetings with the special education leaders of all of the charter schools to allow them to collaborate and find ways to address the needs of their students. Tier 2 has been the higher interest level of our charter schools, and it is because everyone is focused right now on costs and how we manage those costs, I believe, and tapping into our buying power and our expertise because we have a larger system has been really helpful, I think, for them. In one case, we are in year 3 of partnering with one of our charter schools, providing 100% of their child nutrition services. And because, again, they don't have that expertise and background, what this has resulted in is we're saving that charter school $70,000 a year, and they are finally meeting all of the full state and federal compliances, which is really important because if you fail to do so for a period of time, you lose access to those federal dollars. What we did on our side when we set that contract up was make sure there was enough profit in it for us to not only cover the cost of what we were doing, but to provide some additional resources into that Child Nutrition Services Fund. Transportation has been a really hot topic. A few years ago, we issued an RFP and came in under contract with a new provider. We specifically said when that RFP went out that we wanted the provider to give charter schools access to the same rates as they did for us. So we have 2 smaller charters that are partnering with that provider right now, and we're using them inside of our tiers, which means they are paying less per bus and we are paying less for bus in those tiers that they're involved in. So it's working out well for both of us. Under tier 3, we do sponsor one charter school, Allen Village, which is a K-12 school. That is new to us this year, and we're really, really happy to have them on board. And then we are in year 2 at this point of those voluntary MOUs that we discussed earlier to fund that difference of what is referred to as the local funding cliff around Kansas City.
Okay, so, and I apologize. I thought I had my camera on the last time, so my apologies for not doing that. Really quickly, I want to just go over, so this is feedback to both the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education and our legislators around what we have learned through this process. So charters have been here for, and we've had choice even longer than that, but for 20 years. And we really want to encourage them to do a study, if you will, of the impact of charter authorization in St. Louis and Kansas City overall. And that if you're going to begin to replicate or expand into new markets, to even do an impact analysis on how, how when you do that in these other 2 places that you've already done it, the 2 charter counties, St. Louis and Kansas City, what impact did that have on those systems themselves? And that we would ask legislators to actually require an impact analysis before any charters were proposed in school districts. And that one of the other things that we would like them to understand and look at is read the Annenberg Institute for School Reform's piece about public accountability for charter schools. There are really some best practice recommendations there, and you yourselves can go and just Google that and pull down that PDF document. It's a great document just to kind of get yourself more well versed in some of the things that are being recommended after study across the country about how to improve charter systems, overall charter systems. So I think that's the end of my part. And the next part, I think I get to introduce Ms. Janet Tilley from the Missouri School Boards Association. She is going to talk about the roles and responsibility of the school board.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'm trying to get my video to come back. There it is. All right, good morning. I'm going to take you through some of the core responsibilities for a school board member. And then at the end of my particular section, then Dr. Jones will come in and share kind of what does this look like in the Kansas City area and for the Kansas City School District. Just very briefly, I'm just going to let you know that the Missouri School Boards Association, it is a nonprofit organization, and its purpose for existing is to support school board members across the entire state. We are not housed in Kansas City. We are housed in Columbia, but we serve, I believe we're up to almost 400 and some odd school boards across the state in helping them to be the best school boards that they can, and to support them with any kinds of questions or concerns that come about. So I'm going to go through and share with you some of the basics about school board roles and responsibilities. On this slide, you will see my email down at the bottom. Please feel free, as you are mulling over this decision to become a school board candidate and eventually a school board member. If you have any kinds of questions, you may email me directly. The other thing is that on the Kansas City Public Schools website, with their school board section, they have a number of resources that are excellent to be able to assist and support you as well. So we're just going to start and just, I know this seems like a very simple question and probably elementary, but there are a couple of pieces in here that are extremely important for board members to know. You are publicly elected officials, and you are elected, by the citizens of Kansas City, and you have statutory authority to provide governance leadership for the district. And we're going to talk more specifically in just a second of what that governance means. The other is that a school board and its school board members are leaders and champions for public education in the community and for the support of public education. And Kansas City right now is one of our only school districts that have board members that come from different sub-districts. But even though you may be coming from, sub-district 2 or 4 or whatever, or you are serving at large, you serve the interests of all kids, not just the kids and the school buildings that are within your particular sub-district. And what's wonderful of watching the Kansas City School Board operate is that you couldn't tell, who represents what sub-district, because they understand and they know that they're there for all kids in Kansas City. This is a piece that is sometimes is confusing for board members and especially confusing for some of your stakeholders. School boards have, and school board members have, what is called collective authority, not representative authority. So for example, in Missouri, you will elect your state senator, you'll elect your state rep. They will represent the interests in Jackson County, in Kansas City, and they can act as individuals. What is different about being an elected official who serves on a school board is that no school board member has individual authority. The authority rests with the whole board. So even though you campaign as an individual, you are elected to a group, and the power comes and the authority comes within those group decisions and group group votes. That is supported by board policy, first of all, and then the other is that it's also supported by Missouri case law that was done in 1996. So what that means then is that once a decision has been made, even if you may not agree with it, the school board members, each one of them, have the fiduciary responsibility to accept that decision and to move on. I'll be truthful. I stole this particular slide from one of my fellow kind of sister brother school board organizations, because it did a really nice job of showing that kind of transition that you use between being an individual and being a member of a board. So, you know, individually, you would speak as just you, as an individual. But once you become a part of the board, you then convey the board's decision and message with one voice. That doesn't mean that you can't share what your personal opinion is. It is absolutely important for you to do that. But it's the fact that you accept the decision and that you move on. You know, and then as individuals, sometimes I'm not going to go through all of these that are on the slide, but I'm going to hit that bottom one for just a minute. Because social media plays a great role in our lives. And so as an individual, you can on Twitter, on, you know, Instagram, on Facebook, you know, just in your neighborhoods, you can communicate what your personal feelings and thoughts are. But what happens then with board decisions and board communication is that those have to come from the whole board and not just you as an individual. We use, I know this looks like we're playing Monopoly here, you know, with those, you know, for those of you who are old enough to remember Monopoly or still play it, but I use this particular slide to help you kind of understand what is meant by governance leadership versus what is meant by administrative leadership. So boards provide that governance leadership. So what that means is that you act with your vote and with your governing documents. And I'm going to talk about what those governing documents are here in just a minute. Then the superintendent, in your case, Dr. Bedell, he acts through procedures. You establish the policy on the left-hand side, and then it is Dr. Bedell then who figures out the how and creates the procedures for making it happen. You know, Dr. Jones mentioned the fact that Kansas City uses a policy governance approach, and this was kind of from the research of John Carver. And that particular viewpoint in policy governance is that the board focuses on the what or the ends. And in the Kansas City board policy, they have outlined what they see as being what the ends should be, which is basically, first of all, you know, success for all of the kids. And what happens then is because the board is focusing on the what or giving the vision, then they delegate authority to Dr. Bedell to figure out, okay, how is this going to work? What are the means to make it work? And when Mrs. Quinley gave you that example of where Kansas City put some additional funding behind certain positions, like positions that would help support Title I, positions that would help with the kind of wraparound service and academic services for your kids, that came from a focus from the board. And so Dr. Bedell then decided that this was the best way to be able to provide what it is that the board is asking of by creating those particular positions. As the board, you give direction to Dr. Bedell. However, Dr. Bedell gives direction to the staff. So the board doesn't direct the staff, but the superintendent does. I love this particular slide. I use when I'm working on the east side of the state and with St. Louis, I use the top of the arch as the example. This, of course, you can figure out pretty easily, is from the top of the Liberty Memorial down towards Union Station. We use this visual metaphor to help board members to understand that you're not in the parking lot of Union Station. You have a bigger view. And so, for example, you know that the convention center is down off there to the left. You know that, here's the Sprint Center and Crown Center. But from this viewpoint, you can see all the way down to Power and Light. You probably can see towards the Crossroads area, and you can see the downtown. It is so critical to have a group of people who can keep this level of vision alive and working in order to support all of the kids within the district. And so what that means then is that the board has certain responsibilities at that top governance level. One of the first things is that they clarify the purpose of the district. They are the ones who help to contribute to defining what's the vision and the mission for the Kansas City Public Schools. They also have a financial responsibility. They are asked to approve the annual budget every year in order to make sure that the operations align with that mission and that vision. This one is absolutely key to effective governance. And that is that there is a collaborative relationship with the superintendent, and that the board members kind of step aside, they don't get down into the weeds, and they delegate authority to the superintendent to make it happen. Now, there are ways to be able to hold the superintendent accountable, and we're going to talk about that here in just a moment, because, well, actually, we're going to talk about it now, because here it is. One of the ways that the board helps to make sure that the mission and the vision that they have helped to create is moving forward is that they use the evaluation of their superintendent. So in Kansas City, Dr. Bedell has 3 or 4 key goals that he's working on. And those have been collaboratively determined between the board and Dr. Bedell. The other, and Kansas City does a fabulous job with this one, is that there is continual monitoring of district performance, and not just student performance, but how are we doing financially? How are we doing facilities wise? How are we doing with our partnerships with charter schools? All of those kinds of things become a part of the responsibility of the board. The other that is really crucial is that you as the board member are this connection or this conduit with the community. You're out there living amongst your peers, going, to the store. You're going to, be involved with the general public who will come to you with their concerns and thoughts and ideas, probably more so to you than even to Dr. Bedell. And so that is one of the responsibilities then of the board. The other, and I'm going to be more specific about this one, is that as a board member, you take an oath, you're sworn in, and most of that you are agreeing to is the fact that you will act in an ethical and legal manner in order to govern the district. And we're going to delve more specifically into what that looks like in just a minute. In order to help you do all of these things, there are some tools, some governing document tools that the school board has. One of the first ones is school board policy. It is very important that policy is up to date, that you reference policy, that you use policy to help guide the district. And it is from policy where Dr. Bedell gets kind of his direction of what it is that is important to the school board. The other, and I'm going to share a little more about this in my very last slide, that the board uses is the strategic plan. And Kansas City has one that is expires in 2023, I believe, but it is on the website. It outlines what are the key goals of the district they're going to really focus on within these 5 years. And that helps you as the board to know that, in looking at your decisions as to whether or not that is, is this in alignment with our strategic plan? Obviously, the budget is another one of your tools. And then the superintendent evaluation is again a means that you use to ensure that Dr. Bedell is supporting the mission and vision and the goals that you have set for him. The professional development plan for the district. we can have all kinds of initiatives, but if we don't support teachers in being able to know how to use or to implement these kinds of procedures or programs, then nothing will change. And so the professional development plan is one of your tools. And last but not least is the board meeting agenda. The board meeting agenda is something that it tells the community and says, hey, here's what's important to us as a board. Here's what we believe needs to happen and in moving forward with the district. So let's talk about ethics for just a minute, because it really does help to understand just what it is a school board member does and what's expected of a school board member. One of the first things is that you understand that the first and the primary concern is the educational welfare of, and it's all students, not students just in your sub-district, not just certain students, but absolutely all of them. The other is that you obey, and I know this seems kind of elementary, of course you would do that, but obey the laws of Missouri and the United States. Those boards that are the most effective understand and know what they are guided by law and follow it. And the other one that we've just talked about that's supported by your case law is that you realize that as an individual board member, you can't act and speak for the board unless you are directed by the whole board to do so. You then need to work with your board members to establish effective board policies or principles. You know what Jennifer was sharing with you of those principles that Kansas City outlined for how to work with partnerships is an example of that kind of work. Again, you know, that you delegate the authority of the administration of the schools to the superintendents, but you also encourage that communication between board members and stakeholders. And while this one seems kind of, again, somewhat elementary, it really is critical and important. And Marvi is going to speak to this more specifically in just a minute of what this means in Kansas City. Being a member of the board doesn't mean that you just attend a board meeting once or twice a month. There are requirements and mandates actually from the state about board training. In fact, all new board members have to have 18.5 hours of training within their first year. Kansas City also places a high value on continued professional development of the board members. And so there are many different work sessions. There are many different trainings. There are lots of community events that take place as well. So just know that there is a time commitment for this volunteer job. The other is that you are not a political figure that can have some influence in guiding who is hired or who is not. And that you also understand that there has to be regular and systematic evaluation of the whole educational system to provide accountability for the district. And that you keep up to date, that you improve your governance by studying educational issues and participating in in-service programs and trainings. The other is that, again, that you avoid all conflicts of interest or even truthfully just the appearance of them, and that you can't use, this is getting into nepotism, that you can't use your position to support the benefit of your family members or business associates, that we express our opinions, but we accept the will of the majority. And then the other piece that is critical as far as ethics is concerned is that you demonstrate that you are an ethical board member by making sure that you keep all confidential information confidential. In addition, again, you want to look at the fact that you are committed to serve every student in the district. The other, to answer this question of are you ready, is that are you ready to make the commitment in time? There is preparation before going into a meeting. There is a lot of material that is provided to you. that you have to look at and study. And if you have questions about, you have to ask those questions in advance. The other is that you have to, again, have to know what is expected of you locally in Kansas City. And then to understand that you have to have, by law, these 18.5 hours of training within that first year. And then they have added, our legislature a couple of years ago added that you need to have refresher training of at least 1 hour every year as well. The other thing that you have to ask yourself is, am I able to work as a member of a team? For some of us, that's more difficult because we're used to, in our business and in our lives, of being in control and making decisions and moving forward. But the other one that I want you to consider is that as a board member, you have to withstand public scrutiny. And I can't think of any year that has been like this one, as far as board members getting pushback and concerns from their community members, as we have with the whole COVID-19 and are we in person, not in person, all of those things. So one of the things that you have to know is that sometimes you're going to make tough decisions, and tough decisions that you believe are in the best interest of all students. And not everybody's going to be happy. And so you have to be able to withstand the public scrutiny that will come to you as a board member. There are some next steps that I'm suggesting to you that you do specifically as far as Kansas City is concerned. One of them is the beauty of the Zoom meetings that we have is that they are recorded or they're broadcast live. Most school board candidates make themselves familiar with these meetings just to see how it operates, just to understand what are the key issues that the board is dealing with at this point in time. The other, I'm encouraging you to make sure that you are familiar with the different Kansas City Public School District plans and initiatives. These are published on the Kansas City website. And there's the link for it as well. But it is important for you to understand that when you come in to be a part of this group, that there are already some certain goals that are being worked on. There are already some district kind of plans in process. And so it's going to be important that you understand what those are. This is, and this is from that website that I was just showing you, but Kansas City has a beautiful document that is their strategic plan from the last, began in 2018 and will go until 2023. I get the opportunity in my job to look at lots of different strategic plans from lots of different districts. And I will tell you that this is probably one of the best ones that I have seen. As far as being comprehensive, as far as being actually specific towards what are the real needs in Kansas City, and the measures that they use that are involved. The other thing that Kansas City does, which is phenomenal, is that I believe it's almost every quarter, but they publish, and it's on their website, they give you progress reports on how they're doing with the strategic plan. So you're able to see the actual initiatives and the actual data that supports the mission, the vision, and the goals. One of the other things that Kansas City does, and I will tell you because of the quality of their scorecard, that we at MSBA share this particular scorecard with our new board members in their training. But Kansas City has developed, and it's open and it's to the public and it's updated regularly, their measures that are aligned to their strategic plan, and they are open and honest about what the progress is for each of those. And so it helps the community to know, here's how we are actually doing. If you were asked, how is Kansas City doing, then here are some measures and some data that can help support the answer to that. The other document that I'm going to highly encourage you to review and to look at is their vision of their planning for their future. And again, this document is on their website, but it is their blueprint for up through 2030. If you're going to be a school board member in Kansas City, it is critical, it is important, I know I use those words a lot, that you know this document and that you have reviewed this document so that you're able then to become more acclimated to the team and to help the district to continue to move forward. There is my contact information, my direct contact information. And again, you may contact me at any time for any kinds of questions that you have. But at this point, I'm going to stop and I'm going to let Dr. Marvia Jones share with you kind of what those over very general kinds of guidelines look like specifically as a member of the board for Kansas City Public Schools.
Thanks so much, Janet. Actually, before I do that, I want to, our plan was to have Ms. June Kolkmeyer give a brief overview over the process for election. So, and then I'll come back in the end, but thank you, Janet. So June, would you mind just going over election rules and requirements?
I'll be happy to. Thank you. Let me share my screen here. So we're looking here at what are the rules and requirements for the election. So you want to run for school board. What does it look like? The first thing is that, make sure my audio is on. Am I on? Okay. The first thing is that candidate filing, you must file a declaration of candidacy. And the first opportunity that the public has to do this is December 22nd at 8 a.m. The last opportunity that you have to do this is January 19th at 5 p.m. We're going to talk about what it's going to look like in that month or those 4 weeks. Ballots must be certified to the Kansas City Election Board by January 26th, which is a week after the end of filing. And election day is April 6th. How do we do filing? Candidate filing and the placement on the ballot, according to Kansas City Public Schools policy, is first in, first on. So the first person in line is the first person on the ballot. You must show up because you have to sign an affidavit that says that you are who you say you are. And then I have to notarize that affidavit. Candidates cannot file early, although you can complete the paperwork and bring it in the 22nd on the day of candidate filing. But you cannot file early, and you must sign the forms in person. Now, there are 2 exceptions to this rule, and they are military service and ADA. Of course, if you're in the military service and you are on active duty during the 4 weeks of candidate filing, then you can complete the declaration of candidacy and send it to the board, and I'll give you the address in a moment, with a sworn statement from your commanding officer that says that you are on active duty. Similarly, if you're with the Americans with Disabilities Act, if you are unable to attend or come into the Kansas City Public Schools Board of Education building because of a physical disability, you may sign the declaration of candidacy and then have a sworn statement by your physician explaining why you cannot come in. COVID is not part of the Americans with Disabilities. So if you have COVID, we'll have to make other arrangements. What seats are open? So in 2021, we have 4 seats open. There's Subdistrict 1, which is a 4-year term, Subdistrict 3, a 4-year term, Subdistrict 5, a 4-year term, and then 1 at-large seat. Now, how do I know where? Thank you. I just wanted to show you where we are in the event that you want to find out what subdistrict you live in. This is our Kansas City Public Schools website. If you go to About, Board of Directors, you'll see a picture of the board. Scroll down to the bottom. It's actually not on the bottom, the middle of the page. Find your representative. This link will take you to an interactive map that will show you what sub-district you live in. Click here. And you can scroll this in and find where you live, and you'll find out what sub-district you live in. The seats that are open is Sub-District 1, Sub-District 3, and Sub-District 5. So you must live within the boundaries of the sub-district to file for that sub-district. There is one at-large seat available, and that at-large seat, you must live within the boundaries of Kansas City Public Schools. Go back to my page here. Thank you for your patience while I go through that. So these are the sub-districts that are available. Candidate filing expectations, you must come in and you must file by your legal name. As with every board, the candidate or the board member must complete a conflict of interest, and that's just what the financial disclosure statement is. It's a conflict of interest statement. It is filed with the Missouri Ethics Commission, and you must complete one. I will have an example of one for you when you declare your candidacy, and then you can either sign the paper copy and send that to the Missouri Ethics Commission or file it online. Let me go ahead and show you where those documents are located. So we're going back to the website, and what I want to do here is go back to the main page. Apologies. For Kansas City Public Schools. And again, if you go to About, Board of Directors, scroll to the middle of the page to the board election web page. You'll see a lot of information about the election, the dates that we are accepting candidate filing, and links. These links contain everything that you need to know about attending. These 3 links are the PowerPoint from today's presentation. This one talks about school board finances, a candidate filing packet, and here's a copy of that petition because you will need to get signatures. That is explained in the candidate filing packet. Missouri Ethics Commission election packet. I want to open this because it does contain hyperlinks to all of these documents. And you'll be able to find the instructions for filling out that personal financial disclosure. We do fill out the short form. That's this one. Because we have political subdivisions, we fill out this form, the short form, if you're looking at which form you want to fill out, and then all of the information you'll need from the Missouri Ethics Commission. Any questions, please go to the Missouri Ethics Commission website, which is mec.mo.gov, and they'll be happy to help you with that information. We also have a PDF copy of the Missouri ethics laws in plain English. Be familiar with that. So let me go back to my main page here. So filing begins on the 22nd. Go to my page. Thank you. From 8 until noon. This is a holiday and the Board of Education building is closed that day, but we will open for 4 hours for candidate filing. Please line up outside the building and then we'll take care of your filing and have you sign the documents. It really will be very quick. It'll be an in and out, about 30 seconds to a minute at the most. The offices will be closed from December 22nd through January 3rd. Those are the winter holidays. January 4th, we will be open at 8 a.m. And we will be open until the 19th, 8 to 4:30 during regular business hours. We are closed on weekends and holidays. And January 18th is a holiday, so we will be closed 8 a.m. to 4:30. The rest of the year you have, or I'm sorry, the rest of the month of January, you will have 4 weeks to file for candidacy. If you have any questions, feel free to call me. The number is here. Also, to send any questions to board@kcpublicschools.org. And thank you, Dr. Jones.
Thank you so much, June. And I just appreciate how you and the rest of the team have pulled together that website, very organized, and it's a one-stop shop. So I really like that. I wanted to thank you for that. So now what I'll do is I'll just sort of circle back to some of the things that Ms. Janet Tilley shared with you earlier and give you my perspective on the time commitment that is required by being a school board member. So for context, I was elected in April of 2019. And so I'm going into like my second year in a few months or so. And so I find that I've broken, it was easiest to break it down into a few different things. So obviously we have to attend the meetings. And, you know, it's one of those things that you really want to try not to miss so that you can be fully representing, but also fully abreast of everything that's going on. And so we have those meetings twice a month, usually, you know, in the event there's not a holiday. And they can run sometimes between 4.5 hours. Yeah, so 2 of those. There's also the preparation for those meetings. So I, you know, still being relatively new to the process, I find that I spend about 2 hours in those weeks looking at the agenda items and thinking through them and seeing if I have any questions for administration. If I do, you know, that communication process, I would say maybe adds an hour to the week or so, just kind of going back and forth. Researching anything. So I often joke with my colleague, Ms. Jennifer Wolfsey, about, you know, just how much ancillary research she does on, you know, schools and school choice and parents participation and all those different things. It does take, you know, for you to be a good school board leader, you do need to know what's going on in the overall landscape, you know, locally, nationally, just to have a sense of that, reading articles, that sort of thing. And then I would say discussions with community members. So people may, you know, email or call, or maybe it's an issue specific to their individual case or their child or their experience with a district. And sometimes it's just, maybe they're just trying to advocate for what they think should happen in general for all students. You know, maybe I would say on average, that's maybe 30 minutes a week or so when that occurs. During this process with the COVID-19 response, we've had more advocacy from folks and more discussions with people about, you know, what is going to be the procedure for going back and that sort of thing. And then school visits. So in the era of COVID, that has looked a little different, although we have still been doing that because we still need to monitor what's going on. But in non-COVID-19 times, that might look a little different. You might want to have a more frequent visit to the schools that are in your sub-district. And then if you decide to be a member of or a leader of a committee, we have a few committees right now that can add a little bit more time to your month. All in all, I have found it to be very rewarding. I've learned a lot about leadership and about organization, and just about what the role of a board member is. You know, sometimes, you know, as I think as Janet was covering earlier, we think about like our individual voice. And so what this process has really taught me is that you really have to work through a group of people, and you have to understand the perspectives and needs of everyone there. And that's how you work through. And it's a balance between what the board is doing and recommending and what the administration, how the administration carries that out or decides to do so. So that has been very helpful. I would recommend that folks you take a look at or estimate what your life is going to look like over the next year or so. Things change, of course, and things come up and new opportunities, that sort of thing. But it does help to kind of early on think about, hey, do I have time, and how much time do I have extra to give? Am I, starting a new job? Am I heading into a new graduate program, or whatever you might be doing, because it could possibly complicate your availability a little bit. It's not to say don't apply, but just to keep in mind, or not to file and campaign. It's not to say don't do that, but to just think about what your life will look like over the next year or so. I didn't say earlier that I have 2 boys, also a KCPS parent at Holiday Montessori, which we love. And so I thought it was interesting to even layer on like my responsibilities as a parent in the school. So I remember kind of being shocked when the PTA, the mothers at my school who run the PTA were like, okay, when are you coming back to the PTA meeting? Like in that first, time period. And I was like, oh yeah, I do need to continue to be present at my children's school as well, and continue some of the activities that I did before. The reason that I joined or decided to run for the school board is because I wanted to take the level of advocacy that I gave in my own children's school, and I wanted to expand that to more children. So if you have a passion for that and a passion to be a team player, please, we want to see you file. So with that, I just want to remind folks, I see some folks, someone has already been doing that, but if you have any questions, please put them into the chat and we will get to them. So I think what I'm going to do now is just transition to that Q&A period. So are there any, let's see if there are any questions outstanding. I'll give people a few more minutes to just enter something into the chat. But Patty or someone, anyone would like to say a few words right now? Jennifer, you look like
Yeah, Dr. Jones, can I add one little thing? I thought you did a great job of explaining board service, but the one thing I would encourage people to do is, if you're comfortable with this, we're comfortable in doing it, I think. Last go around on elections, I had a number of potential candidates reach out to me, and we had just had a coffee because they really wanted to know a little bit more detail about the balancing and kind of how, if you do get on, how that ramp up is. And so I think Mr. Hogan, when he did this on Tuesday, we are all pretty open, I think, to talking to people. So feel free to reach out to our emails on the school board page, and we'd love to have a conversation with you in more depth.
Dr. Jones, I just want to echo that. I think it is daunting for people to think about, how do I even run? How do I organize that? How in COVID do I get out and collect signatures? And how do I meet people in this day and age? So I really want to echo what Ms. Wolfsey just said, which is that all of us are available to visit. Our emails are readily available on the school board page. The signature collecting can feel a little bit like a hurdle, so I want people to be sort of mentally prepared for that. You have to collect more signatures than you are legally required to submit. 250 signatures, good signatures, is required for a sub-district race. And if you are going to run for an at-large seat, because that is a district-wide seat, it requires 500 signatures. So what that generally means is, if you need 500 signatures, you actually probably need 600 signatures. That allows you some space for potential, incorrect voter registration, or if it's illegible. So just thinking through some of those things. And I also just kind of want to say ditto to what Dr. Jones said. This is an incredibly rewarding experience. I also ran the first time when my children were not as young as Ms. Wolfsey's and Dr. Jones's, but I had 3 children go through this system. And so thinking through, balancing parenthood and parent advocacy inside the house and outside the house with school board school can be daunting. But I really am a believer that parents do bring a very powerful perspective and experience to this, and can really lead with a lot of passion and heart. For people who haven't been parents in our district, we are always looking for new perspectives and professional experiences. But the bottom line is you have to believe in kids, and you have to have a heart for education in this community. So that's all I'll add.
Thank you for that, Patty. That Ms. Manser, that really helps frame the conversation around what is needed to be a school board member. With that, I don't see any new questions in the chat. I see our colleague Mark Wasserstrom wrote, board service is a wonderful experience. He encourages everyone to sign up to run and emphasizes that we need full participation from all segments of our community. Thank you, Mr. Wasserstrom. All righty. Well, look, we have 4 minutes given back to our schedule. So I don't know if that's an extra cup of coffee or what, but I wish everyone a wonderful day. Please, as my colleagues have pointed out, you can reach out to us if you want any advice specific to a sub-district or the campaign process or what have you. So thank you all, and we're going to adjourn. You all have a great day.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.